This is a Ford Transit, a slow, boring, painfully normal delivery van. This thing made about 70 horsepower on a good day. It was built to deliver furniture, not speed.
And somehow this is also a Ford Transit, a 2,000 horsepower supercar humbling monster that absolutely should not exist. So how did Ford turn this everyday delivery box into this full-blown performance anomaly? Well, the story takes a few wild turns. The year is 1971. Ford wants to advertise a new Transit, which is basically the I need to move a couch van of the era. Someone in the room jokes, what if we put a race car engine in it? But Ford doesn't laugh. Ford says, fuck it, let's do it. And that's what they built. Not a modified van, not a tuned van, not even a van with upgrades. They took a Ford GT40, the exact car that beat Ferrari 4 years in a row at Le Mans, stripped the body off and dropped a Transit shell over it. It rode on a full GT40 monocoque chassis, used the same suspension geometry, and under that goofy van body was a naturally aspirated 4.9-liter Ford 302 pushrod V8, part of that same family that powered the GT40's dominance. Now, before we look at how far ahead the Supervan 1 was, let's look at what the supercars of 1971 were making. Here's the horsepower leaderboard of the era. The legendary Miura, Ferrari Daytona, and the Porsche 911 RS, the heavy hitters. Yes, 400 horsepower. In 1971, a van making more power than a Miura and the Daytona. That alone is wild. And horsepower is one thing, but let's look at acceleration. Now, this is where reality kicks back in. The van body created drag and the gearing wasn't optimized for launchers. So unlike the others, it wasn't built for 0 to 60 bragging rights quite yet. But quarter mile, this is where the GT40 bones show. Even though the van ran the same time, it trapped noticeably similar to the Miura, proving what it was really underneath. In the 80s, Ford ditched the GT40 bones and created a two-frame chassis based on their Ford C100 Group C prototype, a literal endurance racing platform. This wasn't just a performance upgrade, this was a full motorsport transformation. And the engine? A 3.9-liter naturally aspirated Cosworth DFL V8 derived directly from the legendary Cosworth DFV Formula One engine family, one of the most successful F1 engines ever built. So before we drop Supervan 2 into the chart, let's see where the supercars of the 80s were sitting. The Countach, the F40, and the 930 Turbo, the absolute poster cars of the decade. The graph starts out with the Porsche 930 Turbo producing a very respectful 330 horsepower, leading up with the Countach at 375, and the absolute iconic F40 producing 478 horsepower. The Supervan 2, you ask? It wasn't just keeping up, it was sweeping the class with a diabolical 590 horsepower in 1984. And to 60 was a similar story to the first generation. Even with its brick-like aerodynamics, it was still right in the mix at a very respectable 4.5 0 to 60 time. The quarter mile, on the other hand, was a way different story. The F40 was widely considered as the fastest car on the planet at the time, with a quarter mile of 11.8 seconds at 124 miles per hour. The Supervan 2, on the other hand, 11.2 seconds at 128 miles per hour. And here we have a box on wheels that actually pulls ahead of the F40 in both time and trap speed. That's insane. Supervan 3 took everything from Supervan 2 and cranked the insanity up again. Ford kept a shortened C100-derived two-frame chassis, threw on a new sharper, transit-style fiberglass body, and then did the unthinkable. They dropped in a 3.5-liter, naturally aspirated Cosworth HB V8, a real Formula One engine, part of the same Cosworth family that powered F1 cars at the end of the 80s and early 90s. This thing revved up to around 13,000 RPM. Now, before we drop this F1-powered van on the board, let's look at the supercars of the 1990s. The Ferrari F355, the Diablo, and the one that ruled them all, the McLaren F1. The 355 sits at around 375 horsepower, the Diablo just under 500 horsepower, and the legendary McLaren F1 an astounding 627 horsepower. And at the very top of the graph, a transit-bodied van with over 700 horsepower. On power alone, Supervan 3 is out-muscling the legendary Gordon Murray McLaren F1. Let's move on to that 0 to 60 board. We got the 355 coming in at 4.6 seconds, the Diablo at a respectable 4.1 seconds, and then the crazy fast F1 at 3.2 seconds. Then there's the Supervan 3, right at 3 seconds flat to 60. A van trading blows with arguably the greatest supercar ever made. But it doesn't stop at just 60. The race continues on to the quarter mile. The 355, once again, the slowest of the bunch in the high 12s. Diablo getting down to 12.2 at 118. And the McLaren F1 at the time, 11.1 at 138 miles per hour. An insane trap speed. The Supervan 3, you know where this is going. It's at 10.5 at over 140 miles per hour. On paper, this thing is stepping into hypercar territory. By now, the whole Supervan idea had gone way past marketing stunt, and Ford still found a way to push it even further, because the next one doesn't even burn fuel. Enter Ford's full villain arc. No turbos, no cylinders, no fuel. This one's fully electric, built on a bespoke electric racing chassis co-developed with motorsport outfit Starred, using a rallycross-derived multi-motor powertrain. Instant torque, all-wheel drive, race suspension, and aerial that actually works. And yeah, they still wrapped it in a transit-inspired body. Now let's bring in the modern monsters. The 992 911 Turbo S, the Ferrari SF90 This Is Not McLaren, the Bugatti Chiron Supersport, some of the fastest cars on earth right now. The Turbo S, around 640 horsepower. SF90, just under 1,000 with 986 horsepower. And the all-great Chiron Supersport at 1,578 horsepower. And then we get to the Supervan 4, clearing 2,000 horsepower. Yes, 2,000. At this point, van is just a shape. The numbers are pure prototype. Now let's look at what it feels like off the line of 60. And to be aware, all these cars on this graph are considered not only some of the fastest cars in today's time, but in history. Then we have the cute little Supervan 4 at 1.8 seconds. And the quarter mile gets even freakier. With the slowest of the bunch, and it's crazy to say that, the Turbo S covering 1320 at 10.1 seconds at 137 miles per hour, with the SF90 coming in at 9.6 and the Bugatti not too far behind at 9.4 at 158. The Supervan 4, 8.3 seconds at 170 miles per hour. An 8-second quarter mile in a van. The Ford Supervan is legendary because it breaks every expectation. We expect Ferraris to be fast. We expect Lamborghinis to be fast. We know Bugattis are going to be fast. But we do not expect a delivery van to keep evolving for 50 years and keep outrunning the best cars on the planet. From a 70 horsepower work van to a 2,000 horsepower electric monster. That's not just marketing. That's motorsport history wearing a high roof shell. And that is how Ford turned a slow, boring delivery van into a hypercar killing freak of nature.